There was noise outside, very heavy rain. The only thing they saw among the mountains where they could hide was a temple. As they got closer, they became interested in whether there was anyone there and knocked and asked for forgiveness for the intrusion. The rain was so heavy that they could not continue on their way. They needed to pass it on somewhere. And a young man came out of this temple to meet us. Most likely he is the only one in this temple. They looked at this young man and didn't understand why he was so small and was alone in this temple. The boy looked at these people, and he was not afraid because they very politely asked him for permission to enter. One of the travelers thought that when he went to this temple, he did not know that there was someone in this temple. He turned to the young man and asked him if they could take shelter from the rain here for one night. The boy looked at these people very carefully, but they did nothing bad to him. He thought about who those people were. He didn't know anything about them and why they were here. And he also thought that despite the fact that he is much younger than all these people, they show him respect. Most likely these people think that he is looking after this temple. The boy thought that apparently these people are not so bad after all. She showed him that there is no need to be afraid of them. He said that he himself came across this screen several years ago and to this day it remains here, and he also suggested to these people that they can be located anywhere. The boy said that they can't choose any place except the room, and pointed to it with his hand because he was already using it. One of these people thanked him for his kindness and said that they would do everything as he asked. Then he turned to his men and explained to them that they must do everything as they had just heard. They must choose a place for themselves to take shelter from the rain, but they must not be too close to the young man's room. This man asked his people again if they understood everything. The people who were with him answered him yes. They called him the leader. All the strangers who came to this temple very quickly scattered in different directions. The boy only managed to notice that on the clothes of each of them, there was the inscription Tan. So he thought that it seemed like they were all from the same clan, and he also became interested in what they were doing. Despite his curiosity, he thought that he had much more important things to do, and he did not focus his attention on this. The boy went to his room, he opened the doors and went inside, and it continued to rain outside. The young man first went into one, and then asked into another room in which there were huge barrels. He thought that it was time for dinner for his kids. When he approached these barrels, he was very happy. His face changed and his mood became completely different. That at some point these boys were replaced. He danced and shouted to someone that it was time to eat. He approached the place where there were several huge barrels tightly closed with lids. Opening one lid slightly and looking inside, he heard a buzzing sound. At the bottom of this barrel were small beetles that made this buzzing sound. The boy asked them for forgiveness for coming so late. They were probably very hungry. I poured out some food for them and he immediately closed the top lid as tightly as it had been closed before. These bugs that were at the bottom of the barrel were black ground tigers. They were originally from Hainan, China. This tarantula beetle grows up to 20 centimeters in length and has a characteristic coloration reminiscent of the gram. The boy took out each of these beetles and noticed that the black one was eating better than the others. The boy said that if it weren't for them, he couldn't even imagine what would happen to him. He watched this black guy eat and thought that he really liked his reaction. The boy said that the baby, who used to be the size of a fingernail, had already managed to grow so quickly, and he would be very happy with this. Then he decided that he had fed this beetle enough and now he had to feed the rest. So he turned and walked towards the others. Now it was the next one's turn to be fed, so he walked over to a cabinet with lots of drawers. The boy opened one of these boxes and drove a new one inside. There was another of his pupils. In this box was a Bawenling cave gecko. He was also eagerly waiting to be fed. This was also a habitual inhabitant of this area and had characteristic stripes on its body and tail. The boy said that in his past life he barely had enough money for himself, but here they were everywhere, and he really enjoyed watching them grow. He took out a barrel of one beetle and put it in the gecko's mouth, which opened its mouth very quickly so that it almost bit off the boy's finger. He just grabbed his finger and wasn't going to let go. The boy screamed in pain and turned red. He started to jerk his hand from top to bottom. At that moment, he remembered his past life. It was before he got into this body. In his past life, he was an ordinary streamer, and he had 1 million subscribers. He had a channel called Thrill Collector. The main content he posted on his channel was poisonous animals. At one point, he had one problem. In honor of reaching 1 million subscribers, fans asked to do a live broadcast. At that moment, he decided that he needed to go to Africa in search of the black mamba, one of the 10 most dangerous and poisonous snakes in the world, and one of the most aggressive. He could not find the snake because they are not yard cats that are so easy to find. Then he thought that he should rest a little and he should go on a quest again. His subscribers said that he could rest and they would wait. He then thought how hard it was and why it was so difficult for him to find this snake. His subscribers asked him what would happen if a snake bit him and whether he was ready to accept death. In fact, the black mamba he was trying so hard to find was right in his refrigerator. And when he found her, and she instantly bit him, all this was live. His subscribers were shocked that the snake bit him. In that past life, after being bitten by a black mamba snake, he immediately fell to the floor and died, and that was the end of his past life. This time, when he freed his finger, he looked at it. He found it funny that he couldn't even find the snake bite research. One of these snakes was there all the time. At that moment, he heard a knock on his door. Most likely, it was one of the strangers he had let into the temple. The man behind the door asked him if he was in his room because he wanted to talk to him. The boy opened the door and asked the stranger what was going on since they had already agreed on everything. The man said that he wanted to thank him for his kindness and invite him to have dinner with them. The stranger said that they had caught a deer and cooked it. The boy was a little confused. Were they really going to eat the deer? He understood and was very happy because he would be able to eat fresh meat. He asked his pets for forgiveness because all this time he had been eating only snakes and lizards. The boy said that he would be very grateful to them for sharing food with him. The stranger said that, then let him follow him. When they went outside, he saw a huge fire in the middle of the yard. He came closer to this and saw that a huge deer carcass was roasting on the spindle. The smell was spreading all around. He even started to salivate. He watched without taking his eyes off the meat that was being cooked right before his eyes, his mouth watering. The stranger noticed that the boy was reacting to the meat in this way. He told him that it should fry a little more. But in the meantime, he would like to ask him about something. The boy thought that most likely this stranger noticed that he did not take his eyes off the meat. So he said that of course the stranger could ask him whatever he wanted. The man turned his head and asked if he really lived in this temple alone and how old he was. The boy grinned. Then he replied that he thought he was about 14 years old. The stranger asked him again if he really thought so. Then the boy explained that he had simply hit his head as a child, so he had problems with his memory. He was thinking about only one thing, not to blurt out the truth that no one would understand. No one would tell him. He asked again. Perhaps something terrible had happened to him. Then he asked the boy again that from his conversation it turns out that he has always lived here in this temple. One boy answered that he does not have any special talents, so he catches snakes and sells their skins. The stranger was very surprised because he was so young and caught such dangerous creatures. The boy replied that he was already used to it. The man who was frying the meat came up and said that the first piece was ready and you could take it. It was an old man who handed the boy this piece of meat and said that judging by everything, he was the hungriest of all the others. The boy thanked the old man. Then he picked up a piece of meat and said that they couldn't even imagine how long it had been since he had eaten real meat. After taking the first bite, he felt a rush throughout his body. When he started chewing this meat, it seemed to him that this was the greatest happiness he had experienced in recent times. The old man who was standing nearby noticed that the young man had an excellent appetite. The second stranger simply laughed. Not to get acquainted, said that he wants to tell this boy the reason why they are here in this temple. He said that there was something they were looking for, and asked the boy if he had noticed anything strange by any chance. The boy asked him again what he meant by strange. Then the stranger thought about it. He didn't know if it was okay for this young man to talk about it. The old man told the chief that if this boy gave them shelter in this temple, then he believes that he can be told the whole truth. And then he added the young men, and of course he can get angry with them after he showed generosity to them. Moreover, he lives here alone, so he can't tell anyone. The stranger said that the elder was right as always, it was his father. The chief turned his head, looked at the boy and said that he was ready to tell him the whole truth because, in fact, they are looking for a scolopendra with blue spots on its body. The boy asked him again if they really needed a scolopendra with blue spots. He got a little scared because he heard that they were really looking for a giant one. She was looking for Petra with bright blue spots on her body. She is huge in size, so it is difficult not to notice her. The boy asked again how big it was. The stranger who was sitting next to him answered if the centipede was an adult. Then she can easily swallow a child like him. The boy jumped up and became scared that she could be so big that she could eat a person. At that moment, he thought that all this time he thought that he had just ended up several hundred years in the past. But it seemed that at that moment, he was in a completely different world. The stranger realized that they had scared him very much. The elder told the boy not to worry because they had come to this area to catch this creature. The boy asked them if they really wanted to catch him and then raise him at home. The elder and the headman were surprised and said, "Really? The elder could not even imagine that someone could think or do such a thing as raising a centipede at home. He even laughed. Is it really possible to grow a giant centipede at home? It was very funny. The stranger told the boy that he has a sense of humor. The elder tried to explain to the boy that they were not going to raise her at all. They were using her as a medicine. The boy was very surprised. He wondered if these guys were just simple drug dealers. These words seemed completely untrue to him because it was really possible to make medicine from a centipede. The elder looked at the boy and said that despite what he thought, they still wanted to try to do it because his granddaughter was so sick that she couldn't even get out of bed. And then he added that he thought the centipede crystals were filled with chi and could heal his poor child. The boy looked at the elder and asked again if his granddaughter was sick. The stranger replied that this was exactly the case. She was the elder's granddaughter and his daughter. The boy thought that they were probably trying to find some way to cure this girl, but he didn't think that centipede could help them. The boy thought that most likely the poor centipede would die just like that, but these people treated him to meat, and he thought that he should help them. He turned around and looked at the stranger and told him about the centipede, that he had never seen one. The head was very upset after these words. This was his last hope. And the boy added that he had never met a giant squadron with blue spots. The stranger was very surprised. At that moment, the boy smiled. It seemed to him that he could help these people who fed him. So he told them that he thought he could find out where this giant centipede was. In fact, he was a thrill seeker in his life and he never gave up. Even if he died from the bite of a poisonous snake, he understood reptiles and their fellows better than others. He knew that out of approximately 8.7 million species of living things, about 20,000 of them were known to be poisonous. And all the information about all these poisonous creatures was in his head. It didn't go anywhere. He knew all about centipedes. He knew that they were an exception to this list. If we were talking about poisonous creatures, then he had no equal in this. He knew absolutely everything about them. He closed his eyes and imagined that there was a book in front of him in which he could get all the information about where the centipede was. The pages of this book were turning over very quickly, one after another, as if he was reading them so quickly. Then the boy very abruptly closed this book, and he still stood with his eyes closed. Then he smiled and opened his eyes and shouted loudly that he had found. The boy told his new acquaintances that he thought he knew where they could find a giant centipede. The elder and the chief were very surprised. Could he really help them find this giant centipede? They wanted to know where it was. The boy thought for a bit. He needed to somehow explain to them where they needed to look. So he asked these two people to tell him where they had already searched before coming here. The chief began to say that they had already searched to the north and east of this place. Mainly only during the day in the north, they concentrated on the area near the river. The boy thought about these words even more and said that they had acted incorrectly, and it was clear to him why they had not found it yet. Then he told them that now it was not surprising to him at all that they had not come across the centipede. The elder was indignant. Why did he say that? That it was not surprising. He wanted to know what the reason was. Then the boy raised his one hand and said that he understood everything and tried to explain it to them. That millipedes, or as they are otherwise called, representatives of the silt, also have features. With a wide range of territorial activities, they constantly need shelter to maintain temperature and humidity. He said that it is interesting to note that unlike most insects that have a waterproof membrane, centipedes have a weak membrane and also have breathing holes on the surface of the shell, which is why they do not like to be in the water at all. This is a creature that needs high humidity, but at the same time does not like a large amount of water. However, in areas where there is no water at all, centipedes will not survive for long. So it turns out that the giant centipede most likely lives somewhere in the jungle, but not near the river. Elder Moscow grabbed his head and said that this could not be. He had information that centipedes live near the river or in the trees. The boys told them that in such places you can find small centipedes, but they said that they were looking for huge centipedes. If the centipede is really big, then a rotten tree or a place under a rock by the river will not suit it because it can hide there. The head elder thought about it, because before that they had the wrong information. The chief looked at the boy and asked where they should look for the giant centipede. They were ready to reward him if he pointed them in the right direction. The boy smiled and thought he already knew the answer to this question, but pretended that he was thinking. Then he unexpectedly told his guests that they needed to look for the giant centipede in the west. He said that they should probably look for a giant centipede near the mountains and pointed his finger in the direction. He explained that during the day the centipedes rest under warm stones, and when night falls, they wander around the area. The people who came with the chief and the elder went in the direction to the west, as the boy said. They started looking for the city nearby as he told them, but none of them found anything. The chief stood on the top of the mountain watching his men as they searched. He had one last hope that this boy had not deceived them and told them the truth about where this centipede might be. One of the people turned to the head. He asked if maybe the young man could have made a mistake and said the wrong direction. The head had no doubt. He told his men that they were done for the day and ordered a signal arrow to be fired to alert the others. One of his subordinates launched a signal arrow into the sky, indicating that the search was over for the day. The arrow rose so high above all the mountains that it could be seen from afar. Everyone sat down by the fire and started talking about how hard it was, and they hoped that the boy knew what he was talking about. One of the people said that didn't he say that he had never seen a giant centipede? The second one answered that indeed, if the young man had shown them the right way, then he was a very smart boy. The head had to think and decide what to do next. Everyone was waiting for his word. The leader thought about his daughter, whose name was Hua Yun. She was predicted to become the greatest talent of the Tang Clan. He did not believe that the heavens decided to take her to themselves. One of the people told the chief that the elder had gone crazy. Indeed, after a few seconds, the elder approached them with the rest of the people. The elder looked at his son. He had nothing to say because they also had no results. The elder asked his son if they had any results. The chief answered him that there was no result either. The elder was very upset that they could not find anything, unfortunately. They understood that Hua Yun would not be able to hold out for more than 3 months. They doubted that they would be able to find the centipede in at least 10 days. The two of them were very upset and did not know how to proceed, but they understood that something had to be done. So the chief said to his father, "Why doesn't he go south tomorrow and search there? Because they couldn't find any traces of any living creatures here." The elder told her son that he was right. There was not a single soul in this area. At that moment, the elder had an epiphany. He understood everything and told his son to stop there. "Really isn't a single soul here," he exclaimed. Then he grabbed his head and repeated that yes, this is what they were looking for. How could he not understand right away? The elder shouted that they were in the right place. His son asked if he felt something. The elder said that the point was that he had not noticed the presence of any creature here. His son asked again what he meant. The elder repeated once again that there was definitely no one in this area, and that is why they did not find anyone. That is why it seems to him that they are almost at their destination. The elder asked his son if they had found anything near this stone mountain in the last 3 days. The chief replied that no, nothing had been found. Then he added that there were no traces of animals visible and no movements. At that moment, it dawned on the head of the company too. He shouted that this couldn't be happening. The elder said that this is exactly it. Does it make sense that in such a huge territory there is not a single animal? The chief looked at his father and said that this was indeed very suspicious. Most likely they all ran away from this place for only one reason, or were eaten by the centipede that is here. The father walked up to his son and hit him on the shoulder, but they weren't exactly where they needed to be. The elder said that he was sure that the monster they were looking for was right here, and that they would be able to heal Hua Yun. The chief was very happy that they had reached their goal. Now they needed to find the centipede. Unexpectedly for all of them, stones started to fall from one of the holes. They turned to see what was happening. Everyone wanted to know what it was, but none of them understood. There was noise everywhere. People were confused. "I don't understand what's going on." They retreated back. They didn't see who was approaching. One of the guys stepped on the fire. The fire was no longer in one place, but everywhere it seemed that it was spreading in an incomprehensible way. Then huge stones started falling straight down from above. Many of them were on fire. The elder and his son did not understand what was going on. An explosion occurred on the top of one of the mountains, which resembled a volcano. The most terrible thing is that from this fiery volcano appeared huge paws of an animal unknown to them. And they weren't so huge that they scared everyone around, and the guys started running away. Some of them stood there unable to move because they were so scared. Everyone stood below and watched what was happening. Besides the fact that they were scared, they definitely had never seen anything like this before. The elder raised his head and accurately determined that this was why they came here. She crawled out from under the rock because they disturbed her, but she was so huge that they couldn't even imagine it. They watched her move on a very large number of her paws. It was a giant centipede with fiery eyes and very sharp claws at the ends of its paws. The boy was in his room in the temple. He just felt the earth shaking. He thought, "Wow, this is a centipede going wild." He was wondering how big it was. He asked them to be very careful, but it looked like a centipede was stirring up the mountains there. The boy laughed. He remembered the words of the elder who said that she was so huge that she could swallow a person. He thought, how could this be possible? He became interested in whether she could actually swallow a person. After some time, everything calmed down in the mountains. and there was complete silence again. The centipede that terrified these people at first was lying on the ground. It was unbanded in several parts and was no longer so scary. The elder held a box in her hand. In it lay a giant centipede crystal. The elder said that they will finally be able to heal Hao Yun. The head told his father to take all the people who were not wounded and move to Sichuan. His father did not understand what he was talking about. The head said that hatred was engraved in blood. Mercy was engraved in words. He thought that he still had things to do here that required his attention. The elder said that he of course agreed because he had completely lost his head and thoughts about his granddaughter. The elder said that yes, the young man helped them a lot, so his son should go and listen to his wish. The chief said that the wounded warriors should be nursed back to health in the village, and in the meantime, he would be with the young men. He thought that who knows, maybe he would be interested in hearing about what happened. The boy was sitting on his head. Her shoulder was several centipedes. He did not understand what to do. In one night, he became a father to several centipedes, and this made him happy to some extent. He looked at the barrel where his livestock was stored. They were all closed. He thought about how when he got home, he put the centipede eggs on his bedside table, and then he fell asleep. When he woke up in the morning, they had all hatched and were crawling all over his head and shoulders. He was very happy that he also had a centipede. He didn't even imagine that they would appear so quickly. He thought that they would hatch much later. They latched onto the boy and didn't want to let him go. They thought he was their mother. The boy told them not to let him off for a while. He needed to do other things, but there was a problem. These kids thought that he was their mother, and that's why they didn't leave him under any circumstances. Last night, when he saw the glow on one side, he decided he couldn't miss it. He understood that there was a giant centipede there that could swallow a person. He was a thrill seeker and had to arouse his curiosity. So he went in search of this giant centipede. He understood that the first thing he had to do was find its shelter. When he found the place where she was hiding, he decided to go inside and see how gigantic she was. "Come closer," he kicked her, shouted that she was the size of his fist, and would she really try to fight him? The torch that was in his hands fell to the ground, which really scared the centipede. The boy heard some strange buzzing somewhere nearby and he rose to look. When he got closer, he realized that it was very excellent, and he did the right thing by going to find the centipede. He was very happy because he was able to find 3 eggs. Most likely these were 3 centipede eggs. He was also glad that it was good that the rain had finally stopped. Otherwise, he would not have been able to find anything. Then he thought that he needed to hurry back. He didn't just come here for nothing. He thought that it was not yet time to cry. He should go back and take care of his new friends. He took these 3 eggs, tied them very tightly to his belt, and pasha back. He walked and told the eggs from the centipede that they should wait a little. He would soon bathe them in warm water. The boy thought that he never got to see the giant scolopendra with blue spots on its shell, but he was glad that he managed to save these little ones. The only thing he didn't understand and he didn't like was that they didn't leave him alone for a second. He wanted to catch them and find a place for them because he understood that they would not eat until they were caught twice. So there was no need to worry about food. It was very inconvenient because they were constantly attached to him. He thought that if he dived into the water now, they would definitely leave him alone because they were very afraid of water. So the boy went to the water in the hope that they would leave him alone. "Come closer to the water," he told the little centipede that it was time to swim. They beeped something. At that moment, the head of the temple entered. His hand was bandaged because it had been wounded by a huge centipede. He went inside the temple and then went towards the room where the boy lived. "Come to this room," he knocked and shouted. "Ask the young man, he is in the house." But he didn't hear any answer. Then he called her again. Well, again he didn't hear any answer. It seemed very strange to him because he was small and couldn't go anywhere. Then the head draws that this is very suspicious and he needs to go inside. He opened the door to this room and said loudly that he was entering. When he went inside, he was very surprised because there were medicinal plants and vessels around. The headman wondered if this little boy was really a doctor. He became interested in what was going on there. He came closer. The chief thought that he couldn't touch anything here, and it would be impolite to enter the room without permission. He turned around and went to the exit. He decided that he would come to the young man later. When he was very close to the door, he heard strange sounds that did not resemble the sounds of insects and lizards. He turned his head back and looked again. He didn't understand where this sound was coming from. He stopped and decided to see what was in those clay flasks that were standing on the table. He just stood there for a while thinking how right it would be. And if he looked at what was there, in fact, the owner of these things was not here. Having opened the lid of one of these containers, he decided to see what was inside. When he looked inside, he was a little surprised. He definitely couldn't even imagine what he would see. After all, inside this vessel there was a spider that had food and it ate it. He closed the lid back and thought that it couldn't be. It just seemed that way to him. Hearing other sounds from the box, he decided to see what was there. Come closer. He opened one of the boxes. He saw that there was a lizard there. His surprise was even greater. Turning to the other side from where other sounds were coming, he realized that something was wrong here in this room. He also saw beetles that were at the bottom of a clay container. And in the neighboring yukon, there were eggs that were about to hatch. And in another box, there were poisonous snakes. The more he looked, the more different things he found. The chief thought that he couldn't believe that this little boy could live among all this. Then he realized that this boy most likely breeds poisonous creatures, and he is not so simple. The chief thought that even their train experts could only extract these poisons from these poisonous creatures, but were not capable of increasing the number of living creatures. He thought they were lucky to be carrying the means to save his daughter. Well, in fact, he was much luckier. He discovered something more than he even expected. When he came out, he heard the voice of this boy who shouted to him. The head turned his head, saw the young man, and greeted him. The boy asked what was wrong with his hand. Was he really wounded? The head answered him that nothing like that, but he wanted to talk to him. At that moment, he raised his head, and the head saw something bright in the temple. He did not understand who was there. This creature that was in the temple at that moment was approaching the exit. At first, it seemed like just a brightly glowing beetle that was very small and was on the ground, but with each passing minute, he became bigger and bigger, and it was already a monster that was ready to attack them. The monster had one glowing eye, and it kept moving towards them to attack. The chief ordered the young man to step aside, and he himself rushed to stop this monster. The monster was very aggressive and rushed to meet the leader. He was ready to destroy him. When the monster ran out of the temple, stepping on the ground, he destroyed everything around him. The ground cracked under his feet. I took a few steps forward. The monster was almost at the target. He was near the lava. The monster swung its huge hand to strike the head. He didn't succeed because a lava blocked this blow, so the blow didn't reach its target. The leader had a hard time withstanding the blows of this monster because he was still wounded. The monster stopped, turned around, and directed all its power towards the temple, blowing it up. The head couldn't stay on his feet. He fell to the ground. The force of the blow was very strong. He barely stayed on. The chief thought that this monster was on the same level as his father. He also told the young man to get his feet out of here as quickly as possible. But it was too late. This monster was holding the boy by the throat and lifting him up. The boy begged the chief with all his might to help him, but this monster only laughed. The monster said that he heard that people from the Tang Clan had arrived on Hainan Island, and when he arrived at that place, he found the head of that clan wounded and helpless. The head asked this monster who he was and what he wanted, and he was also interested in how he knew him. The monster said, "Doesn't he recognize his face and red fist because his father made his bloody Rakshasa exactly like that?" The clan leader thought about Takunyan. He heard that he was hit in the head with a poison arrow and thrown off a cliff, but no one knew that he survived. The head of the clan shouted for him to let the boy go, since he had nothing to do with them, and took him in return. This monster answered him that no, he was actually going to kill everyone who crossed his path. The head of the clan thought that this devil was not going to let the boy go. He looked at the boy and saw that he could no longer breathe at all. His face turned red first and then began to turn blue. He began to cough. The monster squeezed his hand on the boy's throat harder and harder, and it brought him pleasure and joy. He laughed. He decided that this boy should be the first to die, so he shouted at him that he was going to die now. The boy practically didn't feel anything anymore. He couldn't even breathe. His eyes were getting darker and darker. When it seemed that nothing could help him, he remembered those same 3 centipedes that were on his body. The very next moment, they jumped out and attacked this monster from 3 sides, starting to gnaw at it in different places. The monster didn't understand what was happening and that there were centipedes right on top of him. The monster screamed that it was just an insect, but he was still afraid of them. So he gave birth to his hand, which was on the boy's neck, and tried to throw off his body of these insects. He believed that they could not harm him. These 3 little centipedes continued to bite him, and black blood spurted out of this monster's mouth. It looked like poison. The boy stood on the sidelines and watched as this huge monster began to fall to the ground. And then a second later, he fell and lay motionless. He took his last breath. When the boy came closer to him, he thought that most likely the monster had already died. Then the boy turned his head and looked at the head of the clan and asked, "Wasn't that a bad man?" The head of the clan couldn't answer him. He was in shock. He stood with his mouth open. He had never seen anything like this before. Then when he realized everything that had happened, he smiled and thought that this boy was not a freeloader at all. Now he was absolutely sure that this young man should join their clan. A few days after Takongyan's murder, the lights were still on in the temple. Inside, you could hear someone moaning very loudly and breathing very loudly. The boy sat on a chair next to the head of the clan, who lay unconscious without opening his eyes. When the chief came to his senses, he thanked the young man. The boy told him that it was not worth doing it better to tell him where his people were now so that he could go get them. Of course, the boy understood that he couldn't leave him alone. Then he wouldn't be able to leave Alec. The head said that everything was fine and that he shouldn't worry. In a few days he would get better himself. The boy thought how he could be so calm when just recently he was coughing up blood. The head said that he was completely fine, but the boy understood that he was just being stubborn because he was in critical condition. The boss took a breath and said that everything was fine with him and repeated again that he shouldn't worry. Then the chief added that he was from Murim. The boy didn't understand and asked again what he meant. Was he really from Murim? The boy thought it was very strange. In this case, it turned out that he was flying and fighting everywhere and using various techniques. The head said that not everyone in Murim is like that, but he is right. Then the boy thought that this was really another world that he had entered. Otherwise, it would be difficult to explain the existence of a centipede the size of a building. The clan leader said that in any case he lived thanks to this boy, and he was blessed to have met him, so he asked permission to properly introduce himself. The leader said that he was the leader of the Sichuan Tang Clan, and his name was Tang San. Then the boy said that his name was Wei So Ren. Tang San thought that this boy's name meant little dragon. It was a good name. And then he added that he had some questions for the boy. Could he ask about something else? Wei So Ren department, yes, of course. Then the head of the Tang Clan asked the boy that these creatures that are on him are scolopendras. The boy answered that, yes, that's right. These are children, giant scolopendras with blue spots. Tang San looked at the boy and asked him if he had tamed the babies of the giant blue-spotted centipede. At that moment, he stood up. The boy said that he shouldn't stand up so abruptly. The head of the Tang Clan was only interested in how he did it, and he also asked while he was waiting for his action, he accidentally saw that he had other poisonous creatures living here. Wei So Ren tried to explain to him, but said that the story would be long, and if he was ready to listen to him, the head said, let him tell. The boy said that we should start with how he found the centipede eggs. They talked long enough that it was already dawn. It was already dark outside and the lights in the house were not on. The head of the Tang Clan told the boy to wait a minute. That is, he decided to take the eggs and raise the centipedes. The boy replied that yes, everything is correct, he roughly assumed when they should hatch. The chief thought, how could he know the time of their hatching? He didn't understand anything at all. Then the boy told him to wait a minute. Then Wei So Ren walked up to one of the boxes and opened the box. He wanted to show something else. He pulled out of this box a lizard that lived inside first one and then a second one. He asked the head to take a look. The boy held this lizard in his hand and said that it was ordinary. It had yellow stripes on its body and white ones on its tail. And then he showed the second one that was in his other hand. He asked the chief to look at it. He chose the lizard with the most stripes. He baptized them, and as a result received a lizard of 2 colors. When the head of the Tang Clan saw this, he thought it was simply incredible. He had never seen anything like it before. He said that the boy made it so that a lizard of exactly this color was born. The boy answered him that it was simply wonderful. At that moment, the head of the clan fell silent. He thought that this boy was not so simple. Then he asked him if he could combine 2 creatures with strong poison and create a living creature with the most powerful poison. The boy asked him again what he meant. Then he assumed that this was in principle possible. He even imagined how it could be done. The boy said if he knew who's stronger, he would surely be able to do something like that. Of course, he added that it would be difficult. The head of the clan interrupted him. He was interested in the question of whether it was possible. The boy answered that yes. The next question that the head of the Tang Clan asked was that he asked the boys to join their clan and put his hand on his shoulder. He said if the boy joins their clan, they will teach him martial arts, and he can have access to any elixir herbs and poison whatever he wants. He said that perhaps with his help they would be able to grow the 10 most poisonous creatures of the Middle Chinese plain if he was not convinced by his arguments. Then he is ready to say that in the entire Central Chinese plain there are only 3 truly most beautiful women and his daughter. At that moment the boy told him to stop. He asked again what the Tang Clan leader had just said. Tang San answered him that although he is a child, he is still a man, and he said that there are only 3 truly beautiful women. The boy said that he was not talking about that at all. He wanted to ask about the 10 most poisonous creatures of the Middle Chinese plains. They are as sinewy as giant centipedes. That's what he wanted to know. Tang San replied that the centipede was undoubtedly a majestic creature, but it was nowhere near the legendary top 10 poisonous creatures. This top 10 includes everything from scorpions the size of this temple to golden frogs. In general, the boy probably never even thought about the existence of such creatures. The head of the Tang clan saw how the boy's face changed. He lowered his eyes and realized that everything would be fine. Then he said that apparently the boy accepted his invitation. Wei Ren kept his hands and fists. He really accepted this invitation. Just 2 days after these events, when the head of the Tang clan felt well, the rest of his warriors came to him. They wanted to know if he had seen the bloody Rakshasa Takunyan. The chief replied to them that yes, they almost got into trouble. Apparently he had been honing his martial arts all this time since he was on the same level as his father. One of the warriors asked the chief what would happen if he destroyed Takunyan. So he reached the perfect level. All his other people began to congratulate the head on this event. The chief lowered his head and said that everything was not as they thought. He had to explain something to them. He said that it was not he who destroyed the bloody Rakshasa, but that very young man who was sitting to the side. Everyone looked. They were interested in whether he was talking about that boy. Then they all turned to him and began to congratulate him as a young warrior. They said a big thank you to him for saving the head of their clan. They wanted to know if he was accidentally unborn. The boy didn't understand what they meant and what reborn meant. The head of the Tang clan told the young man that in order to avoid misunderstandings, he should show all the warriors the same thing that he showed him. The boy thought for a bit and then smiled and tapped himself on the chest several times, saying, "Guys, get out!" Everyone was very surprised when they saw that something was moving under his things, and it was about to come out. There were 3 very small centipedes that had recently hatched and were living on his body. One of the warriors shouted in surprise that these were centipedes. These were the children of that giant scolopendra. They were the ones who killed Takunyan. It became clear to everyone that these little centipedes had very strong poison and this boy tamed them. No one could believe that he had such skills. The head said that in general he offered the young man to join their clan, and he said that he would think about it. Everyone began to persuade the young man and say that this was a great opportunity. At that moment, the head of the clan stood up and said that it was time. Everyone else looked at him. "I don't understand what's going on." He said he thought it was time to get up and put his hand in one fist and said he couldn't let it get too late. The young man looked at the head of the Tang clan and asked him if he really needed to find something again. He didn't hear an answer. Then the chief said that the bloody Rakshasa Takunyan, the skill he learned is called bloody poisonous claws. To increase the level, a person needs the blood and brains of other people. This is a terrible skill. The boy thought that it was crazy. What kind of martial art is this that requires human brains and blood? The head was very worried because if he suddenly left behind a legacy, or he had followers, then they would have to destroy them all. It was impossible to allow such horror to penetrate into Murim. Moreover, if someone became a prisoner of Takunyan, then they are obliged to save them. All the other warriors agreed that their leader was right. Then he turned his head and asked the young man if he was joining them. Moreover, he probably knew the area better than they did. The boy stood silently. Only small creatures crawled on him and made sounds. The boy thought that belonging to a clan would mean something like a lifetime job before he takes up a position. People usually undergo an internship to get an idea of the employee's company and the boss's personality. The boy said that he would help them well. One of the warriors was even a little surprised. The chief said that it was a great decision that he was going with them because they would actually be saving people. Wei Ren had something completely different in mind. He wanted to study the Sichuan Tang clan thoroughly. After all, that's what competent people do, conduct reverse interviews. 3 days after restoring Chitulsan's head, in order to find the place where the bloody Rakshasa Takunyan lived, they stopped at a village near the temple, and they asked if any of the residents of this village had disappeared. They were very surprised that they were interested in missing people. The old man said that usually 1 or 2 people are lost in the jungle every year, but this does not always happen. The chief thought about the words of this old man. It turns out that people in this settlement really do disappear. They worshipped her and thanked the old man for the information. He said that it was not worth it. It was an honor for him to help the head of the famous Sichuan clan, Tang. The head of the clan said that it was time for them to go. The old man told them to be careful, despite the fact that they walked quite a lot. Unfortunately, they did not find any traces. Wei Ren asked what would happen if they didn't find any clues, and Other Dare, the clan leader, thought about this question. He said that he thought that his shelter should be somewhere nearby, and if his guesses were confirmed, then Takunyan was able to somehow notice them. The search turned out to be much more difficult than he expected. The boy thought that this was all very strange. Was it really possible to track this monster? So the boy decided to remember all the details of what he said there when he held him by the throat, and the boy only groaned. Then this monster said that he heard that people from the Tang Clan arrived on Hainan Island. When the boy remembered these words, he immediately understood where to look for his shelter. He approached the head of the clan and told him to remember what this monster said. When the head of the clan appeared, he replied that he did not quite remember and asked the boy again what he remembered. Wiso Ren thought, and it's true that his head was a bit in the mood for talking because he hadn't recovered from the blow yet. The boy began to say that in general, the monster then said that he heard that people from the Tang Clan arrived on Hainan Island. The head of the clan was a little surprised. The boy said, "Does this mean that someone may have accidentally informed him of their arrival?" The head of the clan thought that this could indeed be the case. "Then everything is simple," the boy said, "and they won't have to go around all the places where they passed and use leaflets to ask people if they saw Takunyan." The head of the Tang clan looked at this boy and thought that he was much smarter than he seemed at first glance. He said that the boy had come up with a very simple solution, and why hadn't he thought of this? Of course, the words spoken by Takunyan could only mean that he had heard news of their arrival from someone. Everything stopped much easier than it seemed before. The head of the Tang clan ordered everyone to move out right now. We immediately set off on our way and approached the next village, where there were practically no people on the street. When they came even closer and stood at the gates to this village, they realized that this was the same village they had already been told about. The inhabitants of this village were exposed to an unknown disease. The head of the clan said that apparently the natives lived there. The head of the Tang clan said that they should go to this village. According to the boy, the locals are not hostile to strangers. The boy confirmed his words. When they entered this village, they saw that the most important thing was that there were practically no people on the street. It was very strange. On one side sat a man with his head down, not saying anything and not reacting to anything. Another one was lying on the ground. Opposite these two men sat a woman who was sorting through something with her hands. She was lowering her body down and up. With great difficulty, the woman turned her head and looked at the people who greeted her. She saw the head of the Tang clan with the warriors accompanying him and the boys with him. This woman asked these people what brought them to their village. They also saw an old man holding a little boy's hand and two men standing behind the old man. The clan leader said that his name was Tan Chol-san and that he was the leader of the Tang clan of Sichuan. He said that the reason why they are here is trying to explain why they came here at this moment. The boy looked at everyone around him. He thought that there was no life at all in this village. Even the child looked weak. "Look around." So Ren decided to stop. He really didn't like the locals, how they look. He saw one of the locals sitting near his house, drooling. The other locals couldn't even get up. They were just lying or sitting, leaning back. He didn't understand what condition they were in. It felt like they were all on some kind of drug. The old man said that no one had disappeared in their village. Everything was calm. He didn't want everyone to see the state of the people in their village. This old man demanded that the people who came leave immediately. They are in the village. The head of the clan said that it seemed to him that there were far fewer inhabitants than houses in this village. Then this old man shouted that it was none of their business and that they should immediately get out of their village. The head of the Tang clan was very surprised by the hostile people because he had done nothing to them at all. He only asked them. Then he turned to the boy and asked him if he had told him that they were not hostile to strangers. The boy replied that it seemed like they were. Their conversation was interrupted by what happened to the girl who was holding the old man's hand. The old man started shouting her name, Mei Jin. The girl just fell to the ground. Wiso Ren at that moment thought that she had passed out. The old man picked up this girl in his arms and shouted no. He doesn't want anything because she was the only one he had left. He asked how it happened that she also became infected. The head of the Tang clan looked at everything that was happening and said nothing. Then he approached this old man and said that he could help this girl if he allowed the old man ask the head of the clan if he was really a healer. The head of the Tang clan said that he was not a healer but had some skills. He asked to examine the child. The old man asked him very much to help his girls. Then the old man melted and began to tell that in fact, not so long ago, a monster began to visit their village. He spread leprosy from which even the strongest men suffer, not to mention children. The head of the Tang clan understood what was going on and asked to be given the opportunity to look at this girl. The old man thanked him several times. Then he said to quickly take them inside and ordered his people not to stand and to prepare everything necessary for the healer. The old man with the girl in his arms and two guys very quickly went to one of the houses, followed by the head of the Tang clan with the boy and his assistants. The boy asked one of the warriors if the leader really had healing skills, and they answered that yes, of course he did. Since the martial artists of the Tang Clan have to deal with poisons, they are also skilled in medicine, because for any martial art, the master must have knowledge of the body, which is also required in medicine. The boy thought that until this moment, it turned out that only someone like to kill uses poison if he joins them, then he too can study medicine there. Then one of the warriors said that of course in order to understand the effects of the poison, they inject it into bad people. The boy was very upset because these were experiments on people. It wasn't quite what he wanted, and it looked like they weren't as good as he thought. After some time, there was not a single person on the streets of this village. It seemed like a completely empty village. The doors of the house they entered were closed. The old man and the others hoped for a miracle that they would be able to save this girl. She was lying on the floor around her. It seemed like some kind of green smoke. The girl wasn't breathing at all. The head of the Tang clan said that he had used the skill, and now he had to make sure that the breath did not leave her body. The old man thanked him. The old man said that this is his only granddaughter, and he cannot part with her just like that. The head of the Tang clan looked at the girl without taking his eyes off. He said that, by the way, her heart rate is not constant. The boy looked at him with surprised eyes. The head of the clan added that the girl suffers from this very birth and has a bad heart. The old man answered him that no, she does not suffer from this. His granddaughter began to get sick 6 months ago, but then the disease spread to everyone. He thought it was all about leprosy. He didn't want it to be passed on to his guests, so he ordered all the people from this village to leave. The boy looked at him and thought, that's why there are so few people. The head of the Tang clan told this old man that he had an excellent remedy against the plague and suggested that they gather all the residents together so that they could try its effect. At that moment, the old man burst into tears, and tears began to flow from his eyes. He thanked the guests once again. He thanked the head of the Tang clan for paying attention to his granddaughter and trying to save her, and also for wanting to save all the other people. The boy looked at the head of the clan. He did not expect that he could be so kind and noble. They spent quite a long time near those girls, and therefore it was already night outside. When the head of the clan did not come out with his assistant said that the head had done a great job helping the sick. The head of the clan thanked his assistant for the warm words. The assistant asked the head of the clan what symptoms they had. The head said that they were very unusual. While examining these people, he noticed that some had a slight fever like this girl and intermittent breathing. All the symptoms were different for everyone, but those who had them were clearly expressed also had inflammation. The clan leader turned around and asked where the boy assistant was. He said he was tired helping them, so he took him to rest. The clan leader said that it would be very difficult for a body that had not trained in martial arts to keep up with them. He told the boy to cheer up. The head of the clan stopped and said that he would go and visit this boy. His assistant said that he would take him. A few minutes later, they approached the very room where the boy was. They opened the door slightly to look at him. The boy lay and slept very soundly. His 3 centipede helpers lay near his head and also slept with him. The head of the Tang clan looked at the boy for a while. He didn't know what to do right. Then he decided that he needed to act. He opened the door sharply and went inside. He walked very loudly so that the boy would have time to wake up before he approached him. But in fact, the boy continued to sleep soundly. Then the head of the clan raised his hand and swung it to hit him. The very next moment, he struck the boy with all his might. He hit him on the cheek so that the boy not only woke up, but tears also started flowing from his eyes. Wiso Ren immediately stood up, opened his eyes, grabbed his cheek where he was hit. He didn't understand what happened. He saw the head of the Tang clan in front of him and asked him why he was hit. Wiso Ren sat holding his cheek with one hand. He did not understand what had happened and why the head of the Tang clan did this to him. There was bewilderment on his face, and he was very offended. Tears flowed from his eyes. At some point, he couldn't even hold back and just started crying like a little child. He became very scared, and he started screaming, "I don't understand what the head of the clan is doing." He screamed that it hurt him a lot, to which the head of the Alantan answered him to forgive him. There was an insect on him, and he wanted to swat it. The boy was very surprised. Was there really some kind of insect on his cheek? The head of the clan asked him to listen to him. He started talking about how he decided to go to him before going to bed to check on him, so he opened the door and looked at him. At that moment, he saw how the boy was sleeping very soundly, and there was a bug sitting on his face. He said that he did not have information about all the insects on this island, so he thought that the insect might be poisonous, and without realizing it, he hit the boy on the cheek. Then he extended his hand to the boy and told him to look at how huge the bug was. Wiso Ren knew very well what kind of insect it was. He was not upset at all when he saw it, but he was very interested in how it ended up there. At that moment, the boy thought about this insect and about the diseases that haunt this village. He turned to the head of the clan and said that the villagers were experiencing various symptoms, including intermittent breathing. The head of the clan said that yes, that was exactly it. The boy thought for a moment and said that he understood the reason why the local population was suffering. He pointed his finger at this insect and said that the reason was precisely this insect. The head of the clan asked him again what he meant. The boy explained that this insect is called a kissing bug, a family of bugs that got its name because they suck blood from the eye and lip area of sleeping people. They are also called vampire bugs or killer bugs because, unlike mosquitoes, they are more silent. The insect itself is not poisonous, however. Harmful parasites live in their stomachs, so when bitten, the excrements of this pest enter the body. Trypanosomiasis is a disease also known as Chagas disease, is a parasitic infection that ranks 7th in the list of deaths among humans. The boy turned to the elders. He asked him if by any chance he had noticed that dogs in their village had similar symptoms as people. The old man answered him that yes, everything is exactly like that. Is it really a matter of insects? The boy said that he was almost 100% sure of it. The old man was very surprised. On the other hand, he was very happy. It turned out that in this case his granddaughter could be saved. The boy answered him that yes, of course she could be saved if there was a cure. The head of the Tang Clan intervened in their conversation. It seemed that he even laughed. He knew a way out of this situation. The clan leader turned to his assistant Gupe. He said that now he should understand what he was talking about. His assistant replied that yes, undoubtedly, this young man is very capable. The boy didn't understand why they were talking about him. Then they told him not to worry so much because they were the Sichuan Tang Clan. The head of the clan repeated once again that they were Sichuan. Alan Tang boy thought that he already understood this, but did not understand that he was full. The head of the clan began to explain to him that their hieroglyph is called poison. It is in such words as poison magic and insect or reptile poison, which means the existence of living creatures bred by evil people. He explained to him that such people force insects or reptiles to bite their victims, which causes them to experience unbearable pain or even lose control over their body and mind. The boy asked again, what then? It turns out they can control people. It's just incredible. The head of the clan answered him that this is exactly how it is, and he is right. Many in Murum fell because of such poison. Some killed their own children and then killed themselves. Some betrayed their families and became puppets of evil forces. The elder was very upset after these words. He thought about his granddaughter. The head of the Tang clan told him that this is why the people of Murim had been trying to create an antidote for a long time. This antidote was supposed to completely remove the poison from the body. When the boy listened to this whole story, he did not believe that such a thing could happen. The head of the Tang clan said that this is exactly the case, and he knows for sure the only place where the medicine could have been created. What was it supposed to be in their great Sichuan Alan Tang? He said that no one is interested in such trifles when there are means capable of dissolving almost any poison that has entered the body. Then the head of the clan said that a magic ball with a little of this remedy will help get rid of this disease, and extended his hand with this magic ball. The boy thought, what a cool name for a remedy for parasites. Therefore, the old man should not worry anymore about his granddaughter and the village in which he lived. The head of the Tang clan said that the elder's granddaughter will recover. He will put all his efforts into this. He knows what he is doing. As a result, all the villagers, including the elder's granddaughter, began to come to their senses. The elder was very happy when he saw his healthy granddaughter. In this village, they set up a huge chair because the residents were happy with them and that they were healed. Judging by their hospitality, the rumors that the natives are very cheerful people turned out to be true. The head of the Tang clan told his assistants that if it were not for the help of the young man who was sitting next to him, nothing would have worked out for them. He also said that it was this young warrior who saved their village. The inhabitants of the entire village began to worship the boy. They thanked him and shouted, "Long live our hero!" Even though the villagers were healed with the help of the Tang clan's medicine, the leader gave all the honors to Wei So Ren. The boy thought that the way he looked at him with that warm smile on his face and the way he treated him, all this touched the boy a little, and he began to trust them more, and he was very pleased that they made him a hero. People believed so much that it was he who saved them that they began to throw him in the air as an expression of their gratitude. When they were sitting at the table a little while later and calmly talking to each other, the elder told the Tang clan leader that he should remember because he asked something right after he arrived in their village. The elder then said that they asked something about missing people. The head of the clan replied that yes, they have such information. The elder said that he wanted to pay them for their kindness, so he asked around and heard some very strange news. One of the villagers married a woman from another village, so that village was destroyed a few years ago. And most importantly, people there were dying one after another. These words really touched the head of the Tang clan. He thought it was very strange. He thought this was what he was looking for. Most likely they should go to this village. The head of the Tang clan asked the elder where this village was located. The elder explained to him and said that this village was located much further west. After the festive dinner, the head of the Tang clan decided that they could not waste a minute, and they headed towards the village that the elder had called. Approaching this village, they felt a very sharp, unpleasant smell. It was the smell of a corpse, and they realized that they were on the right path. Walking a little forward, the head of the Tang clan was very surprised. He could not understand what it was. When he looked closer, he saw bones sticking out of the ground, human hand skulls. It was just awful. Some body parts and some corpses were very fresh. They hadn't even had time to decompose. There was quite a lot of pipe poison because there were a very large number of dead people. The head of the clan told the young man to close his eyes and not look at that side. The boy replied that he had already seen everything. When they looked closer, they were even more surprised. They wanted to understand what it was they were seeing in front of them. It was a creature on bird legs with sharpened claws that moved among a pile of corpses. This creature ate not only everything that was left of people, but also parts of other mammals. It looked like a huge bird with a very bright, beautiful coloring that turned among all these corpses. The boy thought, looking at her, could it really be a bird? One of the warriors picked up a stone from the ground and said that he would not allow this creature to mutilate the bodies of the dead even more. He threw Camille and shouted for her to get lost. At that moment, the head of the clan tried to stop him. The stone that the clan chief's assistant threw right in front of this bird flew off to the side. The assistant of the head of the clan, when he saw how this bird was behaving, shouted that it was not a bird but some impudent person. The head of the clan put his hand on his shoulder and told him not to move. The bird was behaving very strangely. She really behaved very strangely. Spreading her wings, she flapped and rose into the sky. Because it was so huge, it seemed like everything around was collapsing and falling right on them. It was like some kind of rockfall. Wee So Ren stood frozen, staring at the movement of this bird. But he noticed something that started to happen when she came up in the air. He noticed that everything began to decompose much faster. It seemed as if the bones were simply crumbling before his eyes. Someone's hand covered the boy's mouth and nose to stop him from screaming. The head of the Tang clan ordered everyone to retreat back. He covered the boy with one of his hands and took him back with him. The head of the Tang clan told everyone that the bird was a poisonous bittern and they needed to move away immediately to avoid falling under its influence. When they moved to a safe distance, everyone wanted to know what kind of bird it was. The head of the Tang clan began to say that he had large wings, a sharp beak and a copper shade, and his body was covered with purple feathers. When a bird flaps its wings in anger, it releases poison, killing everything in its path. On his head he has something that looks like a golden crown, the sign of a true king. The name of this bird is the poisonous bittern. The boy listened to the end and said, "Is this really so?" He had never seen such a bird in his life. He asked the head of the clan if this was really the same bird, one of the 10 legendary creatures, and they answered that it was exactly so. And the fact that its poison ranks first in toxicity among all 10 creatures is why the poisonous bittern is the king. The boy cried out at her, "Is this really the king of legendary poisonous creatures?" In fact, he thought that it was possible to go crazy. Poisonous snakes are cute and not at all frightening. And here, a real biochemical weapon is flying. It was a biological hazard. The clan leader said that in his opinion, the bird must have been attracted by poisonous snakes. It is known that the poisonous bittern feeds on the heads of poisonous snakes. The boy wanted to know if this bird was a common occurrence, and they told him no. He could only meet it once in his entire life. It was the greatest rarity. The appearance of a bird can be seen once in a century. Then the boy thought about it. Everything was going through his head. He had to understand all this. The head of the clan asked him again what was going on. Then the boy raised his head and said, "Will it be possible to catch this bird?" No one knew the answer to this question. The head of the clan looked at the young man, laughed and said, "Does he really want to take possession of this bird?" The boy answered that yes, but its poison is too dangerous. The clan leader looked at the boy again and said that he saw that he was very interested in the 10 legendary poisonous creatures. Then he lowered his head and said that in fact, there is a way to catch this bird. The boy asked him again if he could seriously catch this bird. Then the head of the Tang clan told him that by mastering the martial arts of the Tang clan, he would become invulnerable to all poisons and would be able to resist even the poison of legendary creatures. The martial arts of the Tang clan are unique in the whole world. The head of the clan said he doesn't know what to do because they don't share their knowledge with strangers. He wants to help him very much, but he can't break the clan law. Then the boy asked if he would join their clan. He would be able to learn everything, and he would become invulnerable to almost any poison. The head of the Tang clan answered him that, of course, having agreed to join their clan, he would thoroughly teach him everything he knew himself. Moreover, his gift would not be wasted in vain. However, his thoughts about joining the clan have dragged on, and he thinks now he should also think about his own proposal. These words made the boy very angry because he offered him to join, and now he is still thinking whether to take him or not. That's why the boy immediately said that he agreed and asked the head of the clan to accept him into their Tang clan. Immediately after these words of the boy, the head of the clan said that it was good, and from now on, he was part of their clan forever, after which he put his hand on his shoulder. After some time, they approached the shelter of the bloody Rakshasa Takunyan. When they approached this shelter, they saw very fresh tracks. This was very suspicious. One of the assistants told the clan head to look at these tracks, and then he handed the head of the clan what they found in this cave. It was a notebook with notes. It was written in blood. If that's what the clan leader said, then these are the notes of a bloody Rakshasa. No one understood why it was necessary to write in blood. The head of the clan took this notebook and said that they needed to leave this place and they were going to Sichuan. He believed that they had obtained the crystal of the giant centipede and also obtained information. The boy asked the head of the clan if they could stop by the temple on the way. He wanted to release his friends. They allowed him to do this, but he had to collect his things. Without thinking twice, they turned around and set off because the road was long. The boy stopped and saw that there was something else in the cave. It was glowing very brightly. So he told everyone that there was something else there, and he raised his hand and pointed his finger right into this cave. No one understood what he was talking about. When they came back and looked, they were very surprised. In this cave, there was a feather of a poisonous bittern, which meant only one thing: it was here. The head of the clan and his assistants came closer to this place. They wanted to take a closer look at this Peru. So the head of the clan picked up this Peru and began to examine it from all sides. Then he gave this opera to the boy and said that he was giving it as a gift in honor of joining the ranks of their clan. And besides, only he showed so much interest in poisonous creatures, the boy thanked him. Then the head of the clan turned and looked at the boy and said that he thought about it and decided. He told the boy that it would be very good to give him some kind of title at the ceremony. The boy did not understand what a ceremony was, something like a rite of passage, he thought. At the same time, in Sichuan, the father of the clan leader, who was the first to go home, finally arrived. Everyone was happy to meet the elder. The elder shouted at them to move much faster. He was worried about his granddaughter, Hua Yun. He was told that she was still alive, but she was in critical condition. The elder ordered them to take him to her immediately. Within a few seconds, he opened the door to her room. He wanted to help her as quickly as possible. When he opened the door of this room, his granddaughter was lying with her eyes closed and did not move. Everyone was happy when they saw the oldest. The elder approached his daughter-in-law and said that they were able to obtain medicine. Then he showed the chest and said that the crystal of the giant centipede was in this very box. His daughter-in-law burst into tears and said, "Did they really manage it?" The elder immediately decided that there was no time to hesitate. He needed to use this giant crystal. He looked at his granddaughter and tried to call her, but the girl didn't react at all. She lay with her eyes closed. The elder said that it was good that he was in a hurry, otherwise it would have been too late. The daughter-in-law asked the elder to give her the medicine as quickly as possible. He extended his hand in which he held the crystal of the giant centipede and gave her the medicine. The granddaughter was under the influence of this drug. They looked at her and waited for her to open her eyes. The elder held her hand in his in the hope that she would soon return to them. But the girl continued to lie with her eyes closed. He was in despair and didn't know what else to do. They looked at her and thought of only one thing, that she would open her eyes, but she continued to lie there. And they didn't mentally ask her to open her eyes and give them some kind of sign. The girl lay there unchanged. At the same time, the boy who was on the back of one of the warriors was thinking that he had of course heard that the lands of the central Chinese plain were very large, but he did not expect that it was so large. From Hainan to Qinzhou, they traveled by boat and then fled to Nanning after a month and a half. They finally found the place they were returning to, and they were already in Sichuan. When they arrived at the place, the first thing they did was go to the palace where the daughter of the head of this clan was. They wanted to know what condition it was in. The assistant of the clan leader told the boy that this is the land of Sichuan. The boy was a little confused when he saw the palace. They stood looking at all the lands that belonged to this clan at the entrance right in front of the gates. All these mountains belonged to the Tang Clan, so they were named after this clan. Wei Ren looked ahead and wanted to understand how big this one was to you. It surprised him all. Unexpectedly for them, the door opened, and the warriors of this clan ran out. They were glad that the head had arrived. They were glad that everyone had returned. The first thing this boy thought was that there were a lot of them, and they were glad to greet them. He wondered if these were all the people of the Tang clan. Behind them, he saw a girl standing behind them all. She ran up to them very quickly because she hadn't seen her father for a long time. When the head of the Tang clan saw his daughter, he even opened his mouth. He was glad to hear that she was calling him. His daughter ran towards her father, tears streaming from her eyes. It seemed that she would take one more step and they would be together. When the boy saw the daughter of the clan leader, he was a little shocked because he had never seen such a beauty. The head of the clan was very happy that his daughter was alive. His emotions were overwhelmed. The girl ran up, hugged her father, and asked him for forgiveness. The father asked her how she felt. Wei Ren caught himself thinking that she was simply a beauty. Of course, in his past life, he dated celebrities, but she was much more beautiful than many of them, and it could definitely outshine them all with its beauty. He couldn't take his eyes off it. The head of the clan told his daughter that he wanted to introduce someone to her. The girl was a little confused. He looked at the young man and said that this was his daughter. Her name was Tan Hua Yun. He asked the young man what he called her. He couldn't remember and started to think if he really called her bird cherry or wild garlic. The girl looked at him and didn't understand what they meant. And then the head of the clan said that he remembered exactly. He called her nonsense. At that moment, she was very upset. Then the head of the clan said that this was his daughter whom he called nonsense. They stood looking at each other without taking their eyes off the young man. A beauty in front of him, and she still didn't know how to react to him. At that moment, he remembered when he was talking to the head of the clan, who was telling him that there are only 3 things that are truly important to him. The young man interrupted him and said that he shouldn't be told this nonsense here. At that moment, he just wanted to tell him about his daughter, but the young man no longer understood anything. He only looked at her. Poison Flower Tang. Hua Yun is the most beautiful and strongest girl of the Sichuan Tang clan, and from her childhood, she faced one very big problem. The wife's story said that her skills were quite weak, to be honest. No one was confident in her, but at least the heavens gave her beauty. The elders were talking among themselves. Maybe the head would decide not to marry her off. They thought that was why the clan needed male heirs, and did not understand why the head was resisting. The girl believed that her parents were not guilty of anything, and she wanted to show the elders that she also had skills. She wanted to prove that she was an excellent martial artist and that she could achieve a lot for her clan, even as a woman. Haste has always led to failures because impatience leads to losses in the end due to haste and such a way of thinking. A demon awakened in her mind that no one knew how to deal with, which is why she almost died. When she was lying almost at death's door, and immediately after she opened her eyes, it seemed to her that everything had already changed. The elders did everything to ensure that she stayed alive and did not repeat her previous mistakes. Her mother was very happy that she was alive, but she didn't remember anything. She asked her mother what happened. She remembered everything that happened. Tears flowed from her eyes. She understood that she was guilty. The first thing she did was she burst into tears and asked for forgiveness. She didn't understand how it happened. She just wanted to be useful for this clan. She told her grandfather that she was just growing all her power. He told her that she was just a stitch that didn't want to listen to anyone. The elder looked at her and said, "Is she really asking for forgiveness for causing him and her father so much trouble?" He told her to stop crying because she had reached the state she wanted so much. He ordered her to wipe away her tears, and the girl returned and did not understand why she had to do this. She raised one of her hands and felt that there was indeed a certain power coming from that hand. Go-In Mono felt this force in her whole body. It seemed to her that it was very strange, but she did not resist it. The girl asked her grandfather what it was, and he replied that he had something to tell her. Grandfather said that they met a young man who not only helped them save her, but thanks to him, she was able to achieve the state of white poison. At that moment, she looked at him and did not understand why this young man called her nonsense. He had nothing to answer her, so he stood silently and looked at her. He simply admired her. The boy thought it was some kind of curse. He was so excited by the stories about legendary creatures that he accidentally blurted it out, but he didn't mean anything bad at all. The young man looked at her, laughed, and said that her father had a very specific sense of humor, and he was glad to meet her. He said that his name was Wei Ren, and then he added that he was glad to see her in good health. The girl could not answer him. She was even more surprised. Then she pulled herself together and said that she was pleased to meet him because she had already heard about him before. She said that her name is Poisonous Flower Tanhua Yun and thanked him for his help. She said that she will always remember his kindness until her death. He looked at her and thought of only one thing, that just looking at her could make him go crazy. The boy heard someone's voice asking him, well, how could he not understand what kind of voice it was in his head? Then he guessed that it was the head. The chief continued to tell him that his daughter was beautiful, and he wanted the young man to agree with this. The head also asked the young man if he wanted to pick this flower. At that moment, the young man wanted to communicate with her even more. After some time, he was taken to his apartment. He took a huge bath to relax after a long journey. The little centipedes that were always with him were resting on the table next to him. The young man caught himself thinking that he really liked this palace and he felt good here. Then he turned his head to the side and saw 3 centipedes. He thought that they hadn't even left him for a second. All this time, he told them that he was going to pour hot water and that it would be harmful for them. The guys seemed to understand his words and got off him. It was just amazing. It seemed that they absolutely understood everything he was saying. At some point, it even seemed to him that he could communicate with them. The head of the clan, Chulsan, told him that these kids react to aura. The young man came closer to them and asked them if they were probably incredibly embarrassed to see him without clothes. They began to make some strange sounds. Then the young man laughed very loudly, and these little ones along with him, he thought that they were funny little ones. Then the young man thought that Uncle Gupe had said that centipedes were spiritual beings. He thought that he would have to ask him later what that meant. He couldn't get the last words of the Tang Clan leader out of his head. He could not understand what he meant when he said that the young man would like to pick this flower on the occasion of his daughter. He decided that it was time for him to get out of this bath. After some time, when he came to his senses, he decided to walk around this palace. There were 4 people sitting at the table, men on one side and women on the other who belonged to this clan. The head of the clan said that he decided to place this young man in the master bedroom. The elder asked again because he was curious about where this young guy got such talent from. The clan leader replied that he didn't think they would be able to meet such a person because they not only received help from him, but were also able to force him to join their clan. The clan leader said that his knowledge of poisons was unmatched. He killed Takunyan, and on top of that, I was lucky enough to meet one of the legendary poisonous creatures. The head of the clan said that, moreover, he took the eggs of a giant centipede to tame the cubs. The female part of the clan sat with their mouths open. The elder said that he didn't even think that they had found such a treasure. The clan leader agreed with his father. When the girl heard about all this, she was very surprised and could not utter a single word. Then the father told her that he would like this young man to become his son-in-law and asked his daughter what she thought about this. The girl asked her father again that he wanted this young man to become his son-in-law. At that moment, she was a little upset. It turned out that all her efforts were in vain, and she had not proven anything to anyone. She couldn't give any answer. She sat and was silent. Everyone was waiting for her to say something. Her father and elder looked at her and waited for her to give a positive answer. It was their will. The girl thought that she had reached the level of white poison and planned to reach blue. She wanted to show that she could be useful to the clan. She told her father that she was also part of the Tang Clan, and she understood perfectly well why they were all saying this. Aina stood up abruptly and slammed one hand on the table. She wanted to make this decision on her own. So she told her father and the elders that she had to personally check whether this young man was worthy of her or not. Immediately after these words, she turned around and left the room. She didn't want to sit at the back table with her parents anymore. Everyone looked in her direction, but no one stopped her. They understood that this was a momentary decision. The head of the Tang clan at this moment thought that the young man should be careful because his daughter would now be checking. It was necessary to understand that no matter how beautiful the rose was, the thorns were also part of this flower. She ran away from this conversation because she didn't want to answer this question. And also all this time she was trying to prove that she was useful to the clan. What her father offered her, she thought that now she could finally reach the level of blue poison. If she gave up at this moment, then she would not expect support, and she would confirm the words of the elders. She decided that she should personally check if this young man's skills were really as incredible as everyone was saying. Wiso Ren was also in a very stupid situation. He did not understand what to do next. He believed that the daughter of the head of his clan hated him, 3 little centipedes, and made some sounds reminiscent of a question. He sat and thought only about one thing, what to do, and suddenly they squeaked something to confirm to him. He heard someone's footsteps approaching him and someone's voice calling him. He turned and saw her. He stuttered a little and then thought why she was here and why she came to talk to him. The girl was very polite. She asked him for forgiveness. It seemed that she wanted to make peace with him. She said that in fact she was brought to him by a very urgent matter and she asked him to give her his hand. The young man immediately extended his hand to her. He did not doubt her for a second. Then he pulled his hand back and thought about it, because he had never given anything of his to anyone. He thought about it and then told her that they were rushing things too much, and he thought it would be better for them to get to know each other better. The young man said because he believes that they should not feel awkward during the process. The girl did not understand what he was talking about and asked him. Then she looked at him again and realized that he had misunderstood everything because she had come here for something completely different. So she told him that it was not at all what he thought and that she was not here for that. She got very angry again. The young man smiled at that moment. He wondered if she really behaved like this all the time. It was very strange and funny to him. They stood opposite each other for some time without saying anything, each thinking about his own. The girl took a deep breath and then exhaled and needed to gather her strength and explain to him everything that had happened. She said that she came to this place to sort something out. She asked to give her a hand, and he, of course, could have misunderstood her. The young man said that now everything became clear to him. He laughed because there was a small misunderstanding. The girl sat down next to him and said that she first wanted to apologize and asked him for forgiveness for appearing so suddenly. It was rude of her. The girl said that the young man was not even 20, but he had a bright head, and she wanted to tell him in detail what their situation was. He did not argue with her and agreed to listen to her. This could resolve the issue of their misunderstanding. Then she began to tell him a story that was similar to an ordinary historical drama. He sat and listened to her attentively. She, being the only direct heir of the Tang Clan, is constantly under pressure from other clans, so the head decided to marry his daughter to him. Eunice thought that the head of the clan had already thought about what place he would take. The girl added that he should forgive her, but she needed to be convinced that her father's decision was correct. Then she added, if they don't succeed, no one will throw him out the door, because he saved her, and now she is forever in his debt, she asked. Maybe they could become brother and sister. At that moment, the young man extended his hand to her. The girl was a little scared because now she had to extend her hand. He told her that he understood perfectly well what she had just told him, and he agreed to let her check him. The girl doubted for a while. She looked at him and wondered if he really agreed so easily. Then she took his hand and said that if he agreed, then she would start. She held his hand and listened to his pulse with 2 fingers. At that moment, her eyes closed. She said that not everyone will be able to master the martial arts of the Tang Clan. Some are able to drive poison into their body and master it. Others will simply die. The higher the Tang Clan's poison levels and the deeper the mastery of internal energy, the greater the chance of successfully mastering strong poisons. She wanted to test whether he could master the art of the Tang Clan. The girl said that for this it is also necessary to be able to properly accept poison in your body. She said that fortunately his body is adapted to this. But however, it was at a level of only 10 yards. His body is capable of absorbing up to 10 types of different poisons. She also added that it was actually not bad. Considering that he had joined the clan only at that moment, the young man was very surprised he did not know about his such abilities. The girl continued to say that, in other words, this is the highest level that an ordinary person like him can reach. Then she said that it was time for her to go and she didn't want to keep him any longer. The young man stood up and said that it was okay. Then the girl turned around and left. The young man lowered his head as he saw her off. The words she just said to him stuck in his head. He thought only about that. He is at level 10 poisons. He thought that it turns out he won't be able to catch the poisonous bittern. He even got a little upset because it's very important to him. You even had a time in the palace where a girl was taking a bath in one of the rooms and coming out of it. When she came out, she felt relieved and looked at herself in the mirror. She thought that after she absorbed the crystal of the giant centipede, her body constantly smelled of something strange with blue spots on her body, and this despite the fact that she washed herself several times a day. The girl put on her robe and went to her room. Then she went to the young man's room. When she entered it, she saw that the young man was already sleeping on his bed. She asked him for forgiveness for not being able to see him earlier and to thank him properly. He continued to sleep. It seemed that at this moment his sleep became even deeper, and he did not react. It seemed to him that in a dream she was thanking him and saying a big thank you. He was a little surprised by what he saw and heard in a dream. He looked at her and didn't understand if it was really she, the girl who kept saying thank you very much. At some point, the young man realized that it was just a dream and nothing more. He heard her voice telling him that it was not quite so, and it was not quite a dream. She told him that she just borrowed the appearance of the girl who absorbed her crystal so that he wouldn't be scared. In fact, she is a giant centipede, the mother of those 3 children. The young man did not understand why it spoke like that, and whether it really was that same centipede. 3 small children hugged his legs. He looked at them and thought that they had frightened him. When he looked at these 3, he thought that it turns out that these are baby centipedes. The strangest thing is that they were all girls. He asked these little ones what they were doing in his dream, because they were very small and should be sleeping at that time. She said that she died leaving her children behind. Her indignation reached the heavens, so her soul remained in the crystal. So she spent all this time in the body of that girl. I curse her every day, but one day she found a way to get rid of the insult, so it turned out to be in his. She said that it was all because he came to her with her children. He was very surprised, but in fact he was thinking about the fact that it was he who pointed out to the Tang Clan the location of the centipede. He thought that he didn't really want this, but nevertheless he became involved in her death. It seemed that she completely understood what he was thinking and read all his thoughts. So she said if he feels guilty, then he should fulfill her request. The young man, without thinking for long, answered her that he would do anything. She walked up to one of the girls, put her hand on her head and started stroking her head. She was so attentive and worried about her children that she asked the young man to take care of her children until they grew up. The young man was very surprised because he knew that the baby centipede must survive 2 phases in the mother's body, after which they will begin to grow. She said that this applies to ordinary insects, but they are completely different. It added, before they shed their shell twice, they feed on energy from the mother's crystal, after which they begin to absorb the energy of other beings. The young man looked at her and said that her crystal had absorbed Hua Yun. So it turned out that the children had to be near her. She said that he understood everything perfectly well. And then she added that when she said that to that girl, she cursed her. The young man was very surprised by such words. She said that you are probably smelling a terrible stench from this girl right now. The young man thought that there really was a specific smell coming from her body. Then she added that she did it on purpose so that she would never be able to be with a man and have children. The young man was very upset. She said that she could remove the curse, but in return, she would have to feed her children with her inner energy. Moreover, this way he would be able to win her hearts. There was some sense in her words, so he didn't answer anything. He decided that he needed to think. After thinking for a bit, he said that he didn't really like it and didn't want to take advantage of Hua Yun's position. She said that he was truly a noble young man and she never doubted him for a minute. But she wanted to clarify what he would do then, because this girl wants to see a very strong man next to her. She also added that she would not be able to help get the chi crystals of the 10 legendary poisonous creatures because she was absorbed by this girl. The young man thought about those same 10 legendary poisonous creatures. At that moment, he said that he seemed to have a very good idea. She asked if it was true. He then told her to just trust him and added that he thought it would work. The next day when they met again, Wiso Ren and Hua Yun, he told her everything. She was a little upset. She thought that she really smelled bad because of the centipede crystal. Eunice added that if she lets these babies sit on her every few days, the stench will disappear on its own over time. The girl turned and looked at him. She asked him for forgiveness for saying something like that now. But before that, he told her very important information, and he won't ask anything from her in return. The young man smiled and looked at her. He found it funny. He really didn't need anything from her. He said that he is not such a terrible person to take advantage of the girl's plight. When she heard these words, she was surprised. But despite the fact that he was very convincing, she still decided that she should think about it. The girl said if everything is going this way, then she can't constantly accept help from him. She said that now she is beginning to think more and more about her father's words. Looking at him, she understands that there is something more valuable in the world than achievement in martial arts. The young man said that by the way he was also thinking about something. The girl asked him again what he was thinking about. Then he told her that he probably remembers that he said that he can only absorb 10 different types of poison. She was surprised that he wants to talk to her about it now. Then the young man told her that if he cannot absorb more than 10 poisons according to her, then he would like to absorb up to 10 legendary creatures. He did not want to absorb any other poisons. She turned to look at him and was very surprised because he wanted to get the poisons of legendary creatures. The girl thought that he wanted to become the best for her sake, and this thought made her feel very uncomfortable. She didn't understand how she could be one of the flowers of Marima Tan Hua Yun received recognition from a man for the first time. The two of them continued to sit. They had something to talk about, but she was embarrassed by his words. She said he understands what he just said. He looked straight into her eyes. Then the young man laughed and said that the not-quite girl could not understand his behavior. She said that it would be a very difficult path. It would take decades, 2 decades, and maybe even a lifetime. The young man wondered if this was really all that serious. She exhaled. It seemed to her that what he had just said was simply impossible. He opened his eyes thinking that she said that maybe it was not bad because she heard that he was only 15 years old, and there were 3 years left until he came of age. During these 3 years, if he absorbs the poison of at least one of the legendary creatures, then he will pass the test. She said that he should understand that this will be a test to be with her. He understands that this test is needed so that they can get married. Then she stood up and very quickly began to leave. She said that in general she would root for him. The young man was a little scared. The girl said that it was time for her to go, and very quickly began to run away from that place. The young man did not even have time to say anything to her in response. He only managed to shout at her to stop. The girl turned her head and asked if he really wanted to say anything else. Wee So Ren asked her about feeding before she left. She had to feed the centipede. She had completely forgotten that she had to do it. So she had to come back because it was not only for him but for her too. And he also told her not to worry because they don't bite at all. They were very small and funny. He held them in his arms and talked to them like babies, and they tried to answer him. He told them to go to mom now, and then they would go back to dad. The girl looked at him without understanding what he was talking about. She thought, what does dad mean and what does mom mean? The young man said that she did not understand him wrong. He just said it because they are just children. The head of the clan, sitting at the same table with his father and his wife, said that the extraordinary nature of the young man had not gone unnoticed by their daughter. The elder noticed that they were seen in the morning. It seems that something is happening between them. The wife of the head of the clan said that her daughter rejected this young man. None of them knew what the relationship was between them, so they thought they would observe them. The elder said that he did not want to force them on each other. He thought it would be better if their relationship developed naturally. The clan leader's wife said, why don't they entrust their daughter with teaching the young men? Then they will see each other more often and become attached to each other. Everyone thought it was a great idea. The elder said that perhaps he could appeal to the elders to us so that they could raise the status of the young man. Then he would look better in the eyes of his granddaughter. The head of the clan noted that the elder knows his granddaughter very well, and he does not think at all that raising the status will help the young man. After thinking for a bit, the elder said that his son was absolutely right. They didn't know how to influence them. At that moment, they heard some noise near the door. It was Hua Yun who came and wanted to talk to her father and her grandfather. Knocking on the door, she told her father that it was her. He was a little surprised that she had come to him and asked what she was doing there at such a time. But despite all this, he allowed her to enter inside. The girl opened the door slightly and went inside. She was very surprised because she saw there not only her father, but everyone else too. She asked them why they had gathered there. No one wanted to answer her. The girl said that she came to tell them something very important. Her father was frightened by her words. He asked what she wanted to tell them. The girl blushed a little and began to say that this would concern the young man they were talking about. The girl said that she did everything as her father asked her to, but she was very indignant. The head of the Tang Clan was also surprised. He did not expect such behavior from his daughter. He did not even have anything to say. He asked what she did as he asked and what she was talking about. The girl lowered her head and began to explain something clearly. Her mother asked again if she really started to like this young man. She didn't say anything right away, but it was clear from her eyes that it was really so. She began to like him. Her mother even clapped her hands. Her father said that it was sudden, and he was sure that she definitely didn't like this young man. The girl began to explain to them that this young man was simply not like they said he was. She told them that for her sake, he wanted to become better. He promised her this, the head of the clan. When he heard these words, he did not understand what it meant to be better, but he asked his daughter what she meant and wanted to hear everything from that moment on in more detail. The girl began to say that in general, the young man was at the level of 10 yards, and he wants to absorb me up to 10 legendary creatures, but he told her so everyone was surprised. The elder laughed and said, "Does he really want me to have 10 legendary creatures?" Then he added that this boy is not stupid. The girl said that in a conversation with the young man, she told him that if, before coming of age, he manages to absorb the poison of at least one of the legendary creatures, then their marriage will take place. Then she looked at her father and said, well, he understands why she gave that answer. Everyone sitting at the table started laughing loudly. The head of the clan said that it was necessary to agree on the poisons of 3 creatures because his daughter deserves more. Her mother said that she is still learning to build relationships with men. The girl looked at her mother and said that then she could go and change the terms of the agreement. Her mother replied that it was not worth it because they had already signed an agreement. Besides, if he really had feelings for her, then he himself would try to become better for her sake without any agreements. The elders said that from now on they will treat him as a son-in-law, but they will pretend that they are not aware of their agreement. And if the young man tries, he will be able to become part of their family. Everyone was happy with this decision. The next day in his dream, he saw a continuation of what he had already seen in the previous one with her, and he told all this to the giant centipede. She answered him that it seemed he had managed to completely gain the trust of that girl. The young man replied that courage was his middle name. At that moment, the giant centipede in the girl's body was as beautiful as Hua Yun herself. She said that today was her last day, her resentment had subsided, and soon she would ascend to heaven. Moreover, the crystal had almost completely dissolved in the body of this girl. The young man understood that this was their last meeting. She asked him if he had any request for her. She was ready to listen to this request. The young man thought about it. He really wanted to ask her for something and said that in that case, could he look at her body once? It was a very strange request, but he really wanted to look at her. She thought that he was also a man and agreed to fulfill his request. She knew that people were always weak before lust, and he was no exception. When she started to undress, the young man asked her if she really had to take off her clothes. She didn't understand what was going on. He started to explain to her that she shouldn't take off her clothes. She can do it if she likes it. But she didn't understand everything as he asked her. He said that he wants to see the real true appearance. She was just in shock. I don't understand why he needs this. But then she said that in this case, everything is much simpler than he thinks, and she is ready to show him. After all, he couldn't see the giant centipede with blue spots on its back that was killed. So he asked her. In one moment, she showed her true appearance as she was in life. When he saw her, she asked if that was enough for him. He was a little fascinated by her appearance. He was very happy and thought that it was actually true and she was really very big. Then he asked if he could touch one of her paws, and he touched it, and he said that it had a waterproof shell. How could her joints withstand such a heavy load? He was interested in many other questions. He wanted to know when she walks. She steps on the same place where her front paw stepped. He wanted to touch her everywhere. He asked if he could touch her here, if he could touch her there. He was also interested in how strong her poison was. He wanted to find out from her whether she saw with her eyes or used her horns for orientation. Then she answered him that of course she saw with her eyes. And he also wanted to touch her fangs. She said that it was very dangerous, he insisted, because before that she said that she would listen to any request. She noticed that she was already doing what he asked. At that moment, only one thought flashed through the head of the huge centipede. Would her daughters be okay? And at that time, the young man touched something unearthly. He looked and thought about how shiny this shell was. The head of the Tang Clan thought about what his daughter had just told him. Of course, he didn't doubt the young man, but he didn't think he could do something like that. So he told Wei So Ren when they were sitting at the table that his daughter had told him everything, and he was now his son-in-law. Well, he also reminded that within 3 years, because they will marry upon reaching adulthood, which is quite logical. At this point, the girl's mother intervened in their conversation. She said that she was very happy to see him again, and in this situation, his mother-in-law, the elder, added now that his granddaughter has chosen her other half, and their family is waiting for a bright future. The young man looked at the girl and asked her what all this meant, and why they were all ready to accept him as their son-in-law. He looked at her and thought that she had chosen him, but she had set conditions for the marriage so that it was more like an arranged marriage. He thought that he should get used to her. The young man told everyone sitting at this table that he hoped that they would take care of him. Everyone laughed loudly and started talking among themselves that from now on they would start taking care of him. The clan leader said that they had to show him something before he could start learning the martial art of the Tang Clan. The young man wanted to know what exactly he was going to show him. The elder and the clan leader laughed very loudly, and they thought that this young man's behavior was funny. The head of the Tang Clan said that he wanted to show him the 10,000-yard temple and said that he was completely sure that he would like it. The clan leader and elders said that they had all been waiting for this moment when they could show and pass it on to someone. It was their tradition to gather the whole family before entering the temple grounds. The young man said he was looking forward to it. He thought the 10,000-yard temple sounded like a place where different types of poisons were collected, if that was actually the case. He looked at the girl and wanted her to explain something to him, but she walked silently and said nothing. At that moment, she was so beautiful that he looked at her and thought that there was no one more beautiful. He thanked the Lord for the fact that he was able to meet her. The young man thought that everyone says that beauty is revealed in profile when he looks at her. It is simply a beautiful view. They all turned around and looked at the young man. They were pleased with the way he looked at her. The head of the clan said that he was drilling a hole in his daughter's face with his gaze, and each time he became more and more plant, it looked like he was head over heels in love with their daughter. The girl told the boy to look ahead and not look at her. He agreed. It took them some time to get to the place they needed. The temple they were going to was guarded by one warrior standing in front and two more thugs behind him. These thugs stood motionless. It seemed that they had no eyes. Their gaze was like the gaze of a snake. As they approached, one of these people greeted the elder. The elder said that he came to this place to show his son-in-law the temple of 10,000 yards. The young man thought that it seemed that this place was very carefully guarded. The man who was standing guard shouted loudly that the gates needed to be opened. Two thugs approached the gates and began to open them. Even though they were huge, these gates were so heavy that they ate and could be pushed back. The guard smiled and said that these thugs opened these gates very quickly today. The young man was surprised. After these gates were opened, the man who was standing guard said that they could enter inside. The head of the Tang Clan looked at the young man and said that he needed to follow him. The young man was very surprised and could not say anything. The clan leader began to talk about how these gates were made of metal mined in Nanman. Opening them in front of the young man meant showing him a great honor. He looked at these thugs who were sitting on their knees and they looked tired. He thought that this was really so. Going inside, the head of the clan said that they were already there. He could show him the collection. The clan leader said that this is where all the poisons of the Tang Clan are stored. The young man stood with his mouth open. The elder approached the young man and said that this was a 10,000-yard haul. The most important thing was that he looked at everything and did not touch anything with his hands. The young man looked and asked questions. Is this really 1,000 yards? Do they store medicinal poisons here too, or everything in a row? The head of the clan answered that yes, there are a huge number of different types of poisons, including paralyzing, soporific, and others. He also said that his daughter should tell him about everything that interests the young man. In his opinion, this is how he should feel more sympathy for her. His wife completely agreed with him. The girl blushed a little but agreed with her father. The young man was absolutely interested in everything. She took him by the hand and said that they needed to go there. She would show him everything and tell him everything. She began to talk about the fact that in this hall, there was a huge number of different types of poisons. He wanted to know that she would tell him about the strongest ones that they had. The girl said that this is the most dangerous poison for martial artists. If you inhale it, it will instantly dissipate the internal energy. The head of the clan and his father with his wife looked at the young people and thought how cute they were. The girl continued to talk about the soul-tearing poisons and also about the soul-destroying poison and the blood-dissolving poison, as well as the soul-tormenting poison. She said that all these poisons are very strong, but there is one that differs in its power from all the others. She opened one of the drawers and took out a small stone from there. She told him to take it. The young man wanted to ask what it was. He thought it was a common bean or maybe some kind of berry. It looked most like a tiger bean. The girl said, if you don't take into account, I have up to 10 legendary creatures. It is considered the most dangerous poison. She explained that the plant symbolizing the Tang Clan is the castor bean. The young man did not understand what a castor bean was. In fact, it turned out that it was ordinary ricin, a protein poison of plant origin, a deadly poison, 2 milligrams of which can kill an adult, known for killing with an umbrella during the Cold War. The young man thought that it was hundreds of 1,000 times stronger than cyanide. The girl said that this poison is a poison without smell, without sweetness, without taste, and the most imperceptible, so they call it golden poison. And the murder done with his help was a golden murder. The young man thought how it was just a golden murder. The girl told the young man to remember that the strongest is not the most painful or destructive, but the one that kills unnoticed, and for sure. This is the purpose of their clan, to kill without anyone noticing. They are a family of golden killers. The head of the clan said that it was time to wrap things up for the first time. They had told enough and the young man could not perceive so much information. The elder approached the young men and said that now they wanted to look at the poisonous creatures that he would probably like. The young man was delighted. The elder said that of course if he wanted, he could look after them himself. He also added that they were ready to provide him with everything he needed. The young man thought that they wanted to give him a job that was his hobby. Do they really seriously want to allow him to do that? The elder said that they would not waste time and would go and see these poisonous creatures. At that moment, the assistant of the clan leader Gu Pei came running to them. They didn't understand what was going on and why he came running after them. Gu Pei said that they should go to the palace of the spirit of the patron of the north. The clan leader asked what was wrong there. Gu said that the elders of the clans had gathered there, and they wanted to see them. Then the elder said that they didn't understand that they couldn't stop, and the young man realized that they were talking about the very elders that the girls had told him about. Gu said that they currently have two problems and showed his two fingers. The medicine they sent to the head of Sichuan province doesn't work, so he sent a letter full of complaints. Everyone wanted to know what the second problem was. The second problem was that they entered the temple 10,000 me and the young man without their permission. The elder said, "Did this news really reach them so quickly?" They didn't understand who could have reported this to them. The elder said that if so, then they will go to meet the rest of the elders, turned his head and told the young man to follow them. After some time, they were already near the palace of the spirit of the patron of the north, where all the other elders had gathered. The elders were very surprised and looked at the Tang Clan leader with indignation. They wanted to know how he could make such an important decision alone. They wanted to know if it was true that they wanted to marry some orphan tramp to their precious Hua Yun. The head of the Tang Clan was very indignant. He did not understand what they were saying and what it meant to erase and tramp. He was so angry at the elders for the fact that they had just dared to insult his son-in-law. The elders said that this could not be and that it was not true. They did not believe it. The head of the Tang Clan told them that he told his daughter to marry a young man, and they did not see that there was any problem with this and did not try to object because it was not agreed with them. The elders started talking about him coming to his senses. How can he trust the temple? I'll give 10,000 to some simpleton. The head of the clan said that he had already blessed them. The girl stood next to him and understood how unpleasant it was for So-Ren to hear all this, but she couldn't do anything. So she looked at him and mentally asked him for forgiveness for having to listen to all this. When the young man realized that she felt awkward, he thought that he really made her worry about him, because in fact, she didn't have to apologize to him. At this moment, the young man apologized for interfering in the conversation between the elders and the head of the Tang clan. Everyone looked at him. The young man said that it seemed like there was a misunderstanding because of his skills, and he took a step forward. He said if he demonstrates them, will it help convince the elders that he is worthy of Hua Yun? Everyone was very outraged. The young man said that he could solve the problem with the provincial chief and help him get rid of this pain. The girl and his mother began to worry very much. They did not understand what he had in mind. Usually, he was not one of those who would throw his head into boiling water. But his comfortable life among poisonous creatures was at stake, and he couldn't let anyone ruin it.